Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In today's video I'm going to be looking at the structures of Congress, and essentially this is just an introduction to Congress, looking at some of the key basic elements of it, what it is, what it does, and that kind of thing. So this is all part of my series on A-level politics, and this is part of the section on US government and politics, which is component 3. And the spec says in this element 2.1, the structures of Congress, bicameral nature, the membership of Congress and the election cycle. 2.11, distribution of powers within Congress, powers given to Congress in the Constitution, the executive powers of each house, and the concurrent powers of Congress. So that's what I'm going to look at in today's video, and this is going to be our first step in which I'll go through Congress over a series of videos which will follow on from this one. So bicameral, and what this means is essentially that Congress is made up of two legislative bodies. In US, Congress has got two equal legislative bodies, which is very different to the UK one, where the two legislative bodies are decidedly unequal, with huge amounts of power sitting with the House of Commons and merely the power to delay and a bit of oversight in the House of Lords. Now, they are both elected in the US, which is, again, explains that greater balance in power, though they are elected for different lengths of time, and that's something I'll go through shortly. The House of Representatives is bigger. It has 435 members compared to the 100 members of the Senate. This is because of the proportionalities. The House of Representatives, the number of seats a state gets depends on its population size, but there's no proportionality when it comes to the Senate, where every single state gets 2 senators, hence there's 100 senators. So there's different rules on who can be a member, and there's some differences in the role between the two houses as well. But we've got a proper system built on 2 legislative bodies. Again, we see this repeated in a lot of the world's democracies. The UK has 2 legislative bodies, but they're very, very different in nature. One of the other interesting things to look at in terms of a comparison is the comparative size. And one of the things that I always find utterly bizarre is that actually the UK Parliament is bigger than the US Congress. Okay, leave that sink in. It's just mad, but that is the case. To start off with, I'm going to have a look at the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. It has 435 members. The number of seats each state gets is determined by its population size. So this is roughly proportional. The states have multiple members, which is most of them are divided into congressional districts. And so the member of the House of Representatives, the congressman or congresswoman, represents that particular district, that particular area of that state. These districts are drawn up following a census, which takes place every 10 years. Now, that can alter some very fundamental things. It can change the number of seats a state has. So, for example, in 2010, Texas went from 32 seats to 36. New York fell from 29 to 27. In over 30 of the states, the determining of the boundaries within their state to set up their congressional districts is done by the state legislature. Now, this can lead to what is known as gerrymandering, whereby the party that has the majority power in the state legislature tends to then draw the boundaries in a way that suits them. So this is not a new idea. I mean, we see this back in 19th century Britain, when we get something called dilatoryism, and in that what happened was in 1885 the Conservatives redrew boundaries in the UK to make sure there was at least one kind of middle and upper class constituency in each town or city that they could win. Now, in this, you tend to then get a kind of a solidifying of a particular leaning in a state. So if you've got a Republican state and the Republicans win the majority in the state legislature, then they set the congressional boundaries, and they'll set the congressional boundaries in a particular way that you tend to then get Republican members of the House elected, and it becomes more more securely a Republican state, and then you see the same thing happening in Democrat dominated states as well. So it's a really kind of imperfect thing. Some states have more independent bodies doing it, but in most states we've got this being done by the state legislature, and therefore there is an inherent bias in it. Some districts are drawn up around particular groups, so kind of grouping minority voters together. We've seen an example of this in the 12th Congressional District in North Carolina, which covers, rather bizarrely, a 100-mile stretch of the Interstate 85 road, which has got a series of towns going along it, which predominantly got black voters in them. So they're drawn up in some weird and wonderful ways. And if you spend a lot of time, like I did, staring at electoral maps of the US, and you've seen the slightly odd shape of all these congressional areas, and you'll see that some of them were very, very, very dominantly Democrat, and some were more dominantly Republican, and it's all to do with the way that it is drawn, and this gives us always a slightly imperfect degree of representation. Members of the House are elected for 2-year terms, and so the elections take place at the same time as the presidential election, but the president's only elected every 4 years. So we also have the midterms that take place exactly in the middle after 2 years. So you can have really big swings over fairly short periods of time in the House because everybody's up for election every 2 years. And it also makes the House really, really responsive to public opinion, and a president might well find a friendly House in the first 2 years and then a House turned against them in the second 2. And again, this is what happened to Trump, where when he first came into power, there was a Republican House, and then for the last 2 years of his term, he faced a Democrat House. To become a congressman or a congresswoman, you need to be 25, you need to be resident in the state that you represent, and have been a US citizen for at least 7 years. So, and the salary is $174,000. Now, this has been frozen since 2009, and there definitely is an image problem for members of Congress in the US, in the often they're blamed for the fact that not a lot happens and failure to really deliver on things that are promised and deal with problems that are there. Now, the House has a particular set of powers. It has the power to impeach, that's to bring charges against the president or other federal officials, and we've seen the House do this against Trump in the previous Congress and bring him to trial. The House has the power to elect the president if no candidate wins over 50% of the electoral college, and that's then done on 1 vote per state. And the other really important role that the House, and this goes back to the founding fathers, when the House was the only directly elected House, and any consideration of finance bills, money bills, anything to do with tax, always starts in the House. This differentiation in power is less important now because of the fact that both houses are directly elected, and these bills still need to get ratified and agreed by the Senate. The Senate is the upper house, has 100 members, 2 per state, regardless of state size. So somewhere like California has 2 senators but has 53 members of the House, whilst Alaska has 2 senators but only 1 member of the House. So it really is quite disproportionate in the Senate in terms of the representation, and this has a really important role because a lot of the smaller states, smaller in population size, have a disproportionate say in how things happen in America. A senator, unlike a congressman or a congresswoman, they represent the whole state rather than a particular part of it. So we don't have the same issues with boundaries being drawn up. Now, they are elected for 6-year terms, but these terms have been staggered. And what this now means is that 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years. So when we have a presidential election, we have a senatorial race, but only for 1/3 of the Senate. When we have a midterm, we have a senatorial race, but only for 1/3 of the Senate, and so it continues. And this means that the Senate is less likely to swing dramatically, and is also unlikely to be moved significantly about short-term political shifts in views or unpopularity of one party or the other. To become a member of the Senate, you must be at least 30 years old. You need to have been a US citizen for at least 9 years and be resident in the state that you want to represent. And again, the salary is exactly the same, $174,000, frozen since 2009. The Senate has, again, a series of really important separate powers. So it is where the trial of an impeached federal official takes place. So, for example, the impeachment trials of Trump in 2020 and Clinton 98-99 took place. Now, a 67% vote is required to convict, and both Trump and Clinton didn't receive that, and so neither of them were convicted, neither of them were impeached. If again, they have an important role in electing the VP. If no candidate has over 50% of the electoral college, similar in the way that it works in the House for the president. They also have a really important job in terms of ratifying any treaties that are made by the president. And they also, and this is a really, really big job, they confirm executive appointments such as cabinet members and Supreme Court judges. And at first you might think, oh, this doesn't sound, it sounds important, but it doesn't sound like a huge task, until we talk about the fact that there are about 1,200 senior appointments which are made. This is a really big job. And now the level to which appointments are scrutinised and any risk of them being rejected rather depends on the party makeup of the Senate and how partisan politics are at the time, and the party affiliation of the president. So it looks like, though things aren't 100% confirmed as I'm making this video, that the Republicans are probably going to hold the Senate. So Biden might indeed face a great deal of difficulty in getting some of his key appointments through. We've seen in the previous Congress that with Trump holding the Senate, this played a really, really important role in him getting his final appointment to the Supreme Court, his final appointment of Supreme Justice through. The Senate approved this, and this was because the Senate was dominated by Republicans, whilst when Obama had tried to do something actually not as close to the election, that the Republican Senate had turned around and gone, no, you're in your final year, well, we're not doing it. So that kind of thing seems to make a big difference. Now, there are a series of powers given by the Constitution which kind of fall to both houses. So the Congress has the power to legislate, and there is a need for Congress to be elected. This comes out of Article 1. The Senate has been directly elected since the 17th Amendment in 1913. Article 1 also gives Congress the power to declare war, but there is some kind of vagueness in this because the president, of course, is the commander-in-chief, and therefore they can carry out military action short of war. There's a really weird thing in American political history where the last time they officially declared war was in the Second World War. Obviously, America's been involved in wars since. And there is also in Article 1, Section 8, what's known as the Elastic Clause or Necessary and Proper Clause, and it says to make all laws that shall be necessary and properly to carry into execution the foregoing powers, the previous powers that are given to Congress in Article 1. And that really has been used as a mechanism that's allowed congressional power to grow through the years. Article 2 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to overturn a presidential veto, but to do that they need a 2/3 majority in both houses. Article 5 sets out Congress's role in amending the Constitution, and essentially you need a 2/3 majority in both houses to get a constitutional amendment through. So there's some really important powers given there in the Constitution to Congress. We're just about to go into the 117th Congress, so I'm making this video late November 2020. So we've had the election, but it's all a bit of a mess, and there's going to be runoffs in Georgia and there's still Trump and other people squabbling about votes and making some fairly wild accusations. So I'm going to talk first of all about the Congress that is just about to finish, which is the 116th Congress. So the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. They have 52 senators compared to the Democrats, who have 46. And then there's 2 independents, and the 2 independents have a tendency almost always to vote Democrat. So it's fairly close, but it's significant, particularly when it came to things like appointments to Supreme Court judges. And the majority leader is Mitch McConnell, who is a Republican. Now, the House is firmly controlled in this 116th Congress by the Democrats, 232 versus the 197 Republicans as an independent, and then you've also got the non-voting members of the House, which is connected to the issue with Washington DC and representation for them. Now, the Speaker is Nancy Pelosi, and she's a Democrat and has had some fairly major run-ins all the way through the 116th Congress with President Trump. The composition of Congress is really quite interesting, though in some ways fairly depressing. Essentially, if you want to be a member of Congress, it really helps if you are a religious white middle-aged man, and so there is a degree of disproportionality here. So things are improving. So in 2017, 2018, 83 of the 435 members of the House and 21 of the 100 senators were female. In 2018, 19 this rose, and it was 106 of the 435 members of the House and 25 of the 100 senators. So we got to a total of 131. Now, it looks like this is going to increase going into 2021 up to a total of 141. However, despite this growing representation of women, and most notably women of colour, women are very noticeably underrepresented. So again, this is an issue in the US, it's an issue in the UK and in many other democracies. Congress is more religious than the US population as a whole, particularly the number of Protestant and Catholic representatives is higher than the national average, and the number of unaffiliated or people of no faith or atheists is enormously underrepresented. Other faiths are represented and reasonably in proportion. Another major thing to say about Congress is it's a lot whiter than the American population. 313 of the 435 members of the 116th Congress in the House were white. There were 56 black congressmen and women, 44 Hispanic, 15 Asian, 4 Native American. And then it's even more stark in the Senate, when 91 of the 100 senators were white. Now, according to the 2019 census, about 60% of the US population is white, about 18.5% of the US population is Hispanic, about 13.4% of the US population is black. And so we can see here the white population has been enormously overrepresented in Congress. The 117th Congress does look like it is going to be more diverse than the Congresses before it. However, in terms of gender and in terms of race, it is still not representative of the US population. And again, it won't surprise you to know that most members of Congress and most senators come from either kind of a business or a legal background, and they tend to be relatively wealthy people. So again, maybe not a huge surprise. I hope that's been helpful to you. As I said, this is our starting point on Congress, and there will be a series of further videos to come as I continue my quest to cover the entirety of the A-level specification with videos on my channel, Alan History Nerd. If you're enjoying them and you're finding them helpful, then please like this video, If you haven't done so already, subscribe, and then you'll get notifications as I add more videos. And again, if you have any questions, queries or comments, then please add those and I'll try my best to respond. Again, thank you very much for watching.